Bats are extremely fascinating creatures. Their intelligence, charismatic personalities, and endearing physical attributes are at the root of what makes a person fall in love. It is a regrettable misfortune that these are the very same reasons why bats fall prey to the cruel, exotic pet trade. Bat World Sanctuary is at the forefront of conservation, rehabilitation, and rescue of native and non-native bats. Each year, we rehabilitate hundreds of native bats for release back into the wild. Those who may not be released, such as permanently injured, disabled individuals, or non-native species, are provided permanent lifetime sanctuary. You may be asking yourself, where are these non-native species coming from? How did they get here? I invite you to walk with me as we uncover the painful truths of bats forced into a life of suffering for the sake of human entertainment. The wounds inflicted on bats due to the exotic pet trade cut deeper than our eyes can see, but perhaps our hearts may feel. It is a shame that the common person does not get to spend any amount of time around bats before they are fed the dangerously false misconceptions that bats are dirty, rabid, and out to drink your blood. All of which are almost indisputably false. Bats groom a third of their day to remain meticulously clean, contract rabies at a far lower rate than most animals, and only 3 out of 1,400 species of bats are considered vampires, which are extremely small and don't attack humans. By far, the most dangerous misconception is that bats, due to their simple nature and small size, are capable of living perfectly fulfilling lives in captivity. To a person who has spent any notable amount of time simply observing bats, even from a distance, that last sentence may have caused you to cringe at the thought of bats being considered simple. Bats are anything but simple. For starters, bats often live in large colonies numbering in the thousands and even millions. Meanwhile, the worldwide average size of a family unit is about 5 people. As humans, we can't even begin to fathom the expansively interconnected network of a bat colony. Within these colonies, bats form lifelong bonds with their pups and their roostmates, their families. The average lifespan of a bat is anywhere from around 20 to 25 years in the wild, with each female only birthing 1 pup per year. One can imagine how long these family units have flown together to reach these massive numbers. Bats are highly intelligent individuals, comparable to dolphins and whales. They can solve complex puzzles and use critical thinking to find novel solutions to problems. In the same way, they have the capacity to feel joy, anger, sadness. Bats are anything but simple. Let's take a step back and imagine you are captive. You were taken away from your family and end up in a room the size of a closet. You can walk a few steps, but only if you crouch. Your toilet is to your left. Convenient. However, you may not flush it. Your food is directly to your right, only a few steps from your bathroom. You try to call for your family, but none of them can hear you in this strange place. Nobody comes to your aid. After living in this small closet for a few months, eating nothing but filler foods which lack the essential nutrients you were once used to, your body begins to struggle. There's no room to sit up straight, stretch your arms, signs of malnutrition set in, depression looms over you like a dark cloud. Does your family still think of you? You certainly still think of them. After a few years of malnourishment, you lose all of your teeth. After being in isolation for so long, you begin to lose a part of yourself and forget what it's like to be around another human being. You live this way for 12 years. Miraculously, you survive. This is the story of Baxter, a real, living Egyptian fruit bat who was rescued from the cruel exotic pet trade in 2021. Although most bats die within their first year in the pet trade, Baxter's spirit kept him alive through those long 12 years. It was Baxter's owner who contacted us for help in February of 2020. His owner had used Baxter to conduct educational programs for over a decade, along with her vast collection of other exotic pets. Since she was now getting ready to retire, she needed to rid herself of Baxter. Despite the fact that she had abused this creature for over a decade, we were thrilled to hear that she wished to surrender him. Once Baxter arrived at the sanctuary, we could see that he was severely thin and that most of his teeth were missing. He had survived a decade of malnutrition. Although he was evidently hurting physically, his deepest wounds were invisible to the naked eye. Baxter was mentally scarred, and these emotional wounds were only visible once he began to see and hear other bats for the first time in a decade. He began to quiver at the overwhelming sights and sounds. He was petrified. We decided to introduce Baxter into the geriatric ward, a smaller enclosure where he could feel less overwhelmed and slowly allow himself to adjust to being around his kind again. By the second day, we found him snuggling on a hammock with his new friends. His emotional wounds could now begin to heal. With time, Baxter was introduced into the main colony of over 80 different Egyptian fruit bats, all helping each other heal from similar trauma. Within the hour, Baxter was roosting at the heart of the colony. He was home. Little Sully was one of those 80 Egyptian fruit bats who helped Baxter overcome his emotional scarring. Sully also understood the pain which Baxter had endured, as he was also a victim of the exotic pet trade. Sully was purchased along with another male Egyptian fruit bat and placed into a small cage in the middle of a living room where they lived in constant fear of the owner's cat. Tragically, in an attempt to escape, Sully's only companion became a victim of this cat. All Sully could do was watch in terror as his only friend was killed. When the couple who owned Sully parted ways, the girlfriend decided to call Batworld Sanctuary for help. With the aid of a local rescuer, Lori, we jumped into action to rescue Sully, and arrangements were made to bring him home. He was cared for by Lori and her daughters until the weather warmed enough for him to be flown to us. While there, he received the best of care, including a plush monkey that soon became his best friend. His plush monkey made the flight with Sully to Batworld, providing comfort throughout the trip, and shortly after arriving, Sully began to make friends of his own. It had been so long since he had experienced the companionship of a colony. With his new lifelong friends and plush monkey by his side, Sully will never again have to feel frightened or alone. We now arrive at the story of Benny and the Jet. Benny, another victim of the exotic pet trade, was ripped away from her mother's chest at a very young age. Just like Sully, just like Baxter. The grief felt by a mother bat who has just lost her child leaves her vulnerable to crippling depression. A mother's love is universally understood, even across species. The pain a mother bat feels upon losing that child is unmistakable. After Benny was isolated, and we hope you are noticing a few trends, Benny was fed a diet of crushed monkey chow and instant milk. Benny is a fruit bat, and this diet consequently resulted in malnourishment. Her wing membrane had lost elasticity, her fur was rough and unkempt, she was drastically underweight, and her leg had been broken and healed by itself at some point. When rescuing Benny, it was discovered that she was being kept in a small glass cage in the family living room, with only a singular rope to climb on. She was not the only animal in danger. With the house in shambles, a fawn walked around the kitchen and a fennec fox with an infected eye cowered in a crate. Each of these creatures were rescued. Benny was saved, along with 13 additional fruit bats who were destined for the cruel exotic pet trade. A private pilot was secured so that the bats could be flown to Batworld Sanctuary. Thus, Benny and the Jet, full of rescued fruit bats, made it home. Baxter, Sully, and Benny were each rescued from the pet trade. But how does a bat become ensnared into this barbaric practice in the first place? Surely there isn't a bat puppy mill pumping out hundreds of bats each year into the exotic pet trade. They say ignorance is bliss. Bat breeders exist in many forms. Some may be independent breeders profiting off the lax laws around exotic pets in various states and countries. Others operate under the guise of conservation, where a lack of neutering ensures a consistent supply of babies. The practice most zoos have of keeping several bats in a limited space without neutering results in aggression, food competition, and mothers dropping their babies who ultimately die. This stressful environment is entirely avoidable, yet a number of zoos and conservatories refuse to neuter males as it would reduce the monetary income they receive from exploiting babies, because the public loves to see babies. Then, when these unscrupulous facilities end up with a population that is out of control, they leak their excess bats into the exotic pet trade and research. When doing so, the facility can wash their hands of the responsibility of caring for the bat and satisfy the public hunger for cool exotic pets. Once sold for an average of $1,000, the majority of these bats die in their first year due to loneliness, mistreatment, or as test subjects for research. Meanwhile, their breeders' pockets continue to deepen. This is not only a waste of money, but a waste of a precious life. The exotic pet trade is a multi-billion-dollar business. Money and ignorance are at the root of the issue, and the best way to combat this perverse form of animal cruelty is by not contributing to the demand and by helping spread awareness. A bat's true home is within their colony. Bats kept as pets may never return to the wild. Yet, all living things have the right to a happy and fulfilling life. We have now rescued hundreds of bats from the pet trade since the 90s when Bat World Sanctuary was founded. And many of these bats are still with us today, given sanctuary in large indoor, outdoor flight enclosures, their emotional wounds healed, new unbreakable social bonds created. They are given a second chance at life.